right, welcome back to another episode of GMs for Hire. I'm joined back with the normal crew, Will, Jameel, and RJ. Myself, I'm Matthew Perry. And today, as four anxious baseball fans anxiously wait for the season to start, we're going to do a little rundown of the most recently proposed layout for the 2020 MLB season whenever that does start. And it looks like it'll be divided into three divisions if they do decide to run with it. East, Central, and West. Those each divided up by 10 teams. RJ, if you can give us a rundown on what the East looks like.
So basically, they took the entire American League East and National League East, except they kicked out the Atlanta Braves and put the Pittsburgh Pirates in there. It's a little interesting. I know we've kind of talked about it off camera. So you're going to have the Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Red Sox, Pirates, Marlins, Phillies, Nationals, Rays, Mets, and Orioles. Interesting. Very top-heavy, I think. Actually, it's a very deep division. You got a couple, tankers down at the bottom. Other than that, it's a really deep division that would be really interesting to see those matchups multiple times a year.
Jameel, what can you tell us about the Central Division?
The Central, honestly, is pretty straightforward. It's the American League Central and the National League Central. So you got a couple of good teams over there, like the Twins and the Brewers, along with the Cubs, a traditional powerhouse, and the Indians. So it should be a fairly decent division over there in the Central.
Will, now moving over to the West, what do you got on the West?
Well, just to clarify, just like RJ said, the only thing different with the Central is that the Pirates will leave and the Atlanta Braves will join, which adds a whole new dimension. But the West is actually the only division that stays completely tried and true. The NL West and the AL West are going to just completely merge as the West division. And right now it looks like obviously you got your two front runners in the Dodgers and the Astros, and then there's so many question marks from there on out. A lot of teams could go either way. No team is really kind of dominant as a number 3 team, as we'll talk about with the playoff run and how it's laying out. But right now you have those two powerhouses at the tops and a lot of guys who could end up anywhere, really.
Yeah, the new bracket, to me at least, does provide a lot of opportunities for teams that are outside the playoff bubble, you could say. Especially if it's a shortened season, you could see a team like the Diamondbacks or the Blue Jays, potentially contend. But moving forward to the playoff format, which I found most interesting about this. So the top 4 teams overall, by what I would guess is win percentage, get a bye, and then you'll have 4 games, 8 teams, of course, in one-offs, wildcard games. And then you have the traditional 5-game division series, and then 7-game championship and World Series. I'll ask this, RJ, which team do you think would benefit most from this format?
For the shorter season or with the buys and stuff?
Both, just overall, I would say.
It really kind of depends on how Major League Baseball wants to do it, because we've seen this structure of the divisions, but what we don't know is where the games are going to be played. And we don't know if we're going to be in our home ballparks or if there's going to be like a neutral deal or anything like that. But imagine like a cold weather team. Imagine, you mentioned like the Diamondbacks and Blue Jays. What if the Rockies somehow started off just really hot, and then all of a sudden we got playoff baseball in Colorado? And it could be getting pushed back. I don't know the exact. I think they wanted to start in what time? July and end somewhere around Thanksgiving. I mean, you're going to have teams that aren't used to playing cold weather. Baseball's a summertime sport. And, say a team like the Rockies or, look at the Yankees and Phillies and teams like that. You would think going later into the season that cold weather teams would have an advantage over, say, the dome teams like the Astros or, well, I guess that's not dead, it's a retractable roof, whatever. And the warm weather teams like the Rays, Dodgers, teams like that. If it gets pushed back that far, those cold weather teams, you would have to think they have some kind of an advantage. I know we say this for football. We've never really had to look into the numbers of cold weather for baseball. But this season, we could finally get to see something where weather plays a factor into, who advances.
Jamil, do you think that neutral sites and the weather of November will have an effect on the postseason for some teams?
I think that it will have an effect for some teams, given if you have to play a neutral site game. Teams are designed to play in their home ballparks throughout the season. Like how the Yankees have the short porch and right. Boston has the Green Monster. Different teams are set up to play at their home park. So I think playing in a neutral site would definitely be different. It definitely would have an effect on the games. Playing later in the season, I think will only have an effect if a team like Colorado plays at home where it's going to snow late in the season like that. But other than that, I don't think playing too late will have an effect because it's from October, November. I think it's going to be, if it's cold, it's cold. I think there would be if snow gets involved at that point.
So with this realignment, which would only be for this season, as we know, there's no American League and National League. It is just East, Central, and West. Will, how do you think that could impact a potential World Series matchup?
Well, whenever you look at it, right now, the most you could probably have, or actually the most you can have from one division make a playoff run is 3 if you can get your division winner, and then if you are able to snake both of those 2 wild card spots. And this is now a situation in which you could, bearing some kind of oddity, you could have 4 teams from a single division in the playoffs. And I think that'd be really interesting. And I think you have to look at teams that historically get off to a nice start. And one of those teams that specifically does that a lot of the times is the Cincinnati Reds. A lot of the times the Cincinnati Reds will get off to a very hot April or a very hot May, and they'll get off. And with a shortened season, if you get hot one month, you're in almost. At max, you're going to lose a couple games. But if you stay hot in a month, it's going to be way more valuable than if you were to get hot for 1 month in the regular MLB season.
So do you think that one hot month can ultimately carry a team to the postseason?
I don't know if it can ultimately. I'm not going to say that one hot month is going to guarantee you into the playoffs, but I am saying there's a lot more value to winning 30 games now than there is to winning 30 games before. Yes, they're still aiming for the 100 game season. That is the goal. But if you look at a team who wins 30, would you rather win 30 out of 100 or 30 out of 162? And that those games are going to come down to where every single win is a lot more crucial than it used to be.
It was discussed that potentially double headers and less days off during the season would be implemented to kind of speed things up and keep baseball out of the winter as much as possible. And with that, the MLB was talking about extending rosters to say for like 40, around 35, 40 player rosters rather than 25. RJ, how do you think the addition of more to an active roster in the regular season can impact the team?
Well, number one, it's a great opportunity for those guys who are right on the fringe of making the roster. You got a lot of guys that, kind of knew they probably weren't going to be on the road with the big league team this year. And, under these circumstances, hey, it's a great opportunity for them. You show up, ball out. This is an audition year. This is a weird year for everybody. And so you have to treat it as an audition. It's a great opportunity for them. As far as how it's going to impact the game, I think you're going to see those managers that really like to micromanage, like the Los Angeles Angels. They went out and got Joe Madden. A guy like that who's always tweaking here and there and trying to do little things and try to do this. But that's a team that could benefit from an expanded roster. I would say those kind of new school managers, maybe not the old school, just put your best guys out there. Probably this new school, this new style of, picking and choosing and really studying the analytics and things like that. You could have those teams that really benefit from it. But yeah, it's more for me about the players, good for them.
Moving on, building off of that, Jamil, do you think that the addition of 10 to 15 new players can kind of mess with the clubhouse chemistry?
I don't think it'll necessarily ruin any clubhouse chemistry because it's not like these guys are coming in off of trades. These are guys that have probably been around the major league team within spring training. They played minor league baseball with these guys. So I think when it comes to team chemistry, it doesn't do anything. But I think for some teams, it would hurt them in the front office. A team like the Tampa Bay Rays that is always working on guys on their service time eligibility. There's certain guys you don't want to call up because you don't want to start that clock too early. But in a shortened season, if you're going to have all these roster spots, you can't just let the roster spots sit there idly as well. So I think it would cause real predicament for some organizations.
I think moving from the roster extension to a little bit of predicting would be a good segue. And I think with rookie, as mentioned, if the rosters do extend, quite a few players from each team would have new opportunities to show what they can do. And I think that makes the Rookie of the Year vote all the more interesting. Will, I'll start with you. Is there a dark horse for Rookie of the Year coming up?
I haven't really looked too much into Rookie of the Year just because of the proposed roster sizes being so much bigger, and there's no real telling who's actually going to be up there. Similar to what Jamil said, a lot of teams won't want to push that clock on certain players. And though you may have a 40-man roster, though you may have a 30-man roster, there are prospects that are on the fringe. Let's say Wander Franco, for example, on the Tampa Bay Rays. He is an elite prospect, top number one on the pipeline. He's number one of the 100 of prospects, but I highly doubt you're going to see him up in the major leagues. So Rookie of the Year, I'm not too sure how that's going to work or if they're going to do awards at all. Because a lot of people with this shortened season may claim that the awards may not count. They may claim all this, and there could be a lot of kind of gray area there, and you could miss out on some players, and it could go either way. So I'm not too sure exactly what the deal is for Rookie of the Year.
It will be interesting to see how the MLB handles that. All awards, that is, not just Rookie of the Year. But Rookie of the Year specifically will be interesting just because of the addition of players. RJ, was there anyone on your mind that you had running the race for Rookie of the Year?
No, I got to kind of echo with what Will said there. Rookie of the Year in Major League Baseball, in my opinion, is the hardest award to predict in any of the major sports, I think. You got guys that you got some guys that come out of nowhere. You got some guys with all the hype that are obvious ones. Like look at last season. I think everybody would have agreed that Vlad was going to be AL Rookie of the Year. This guy had all the hype in the world, and I'm not exactly sure where he finished, but he wasn't ever really discussed as, oh yeah, he might win it. No, by the end of the year, everybody knew he wasn't. So MLB's Rookie of the Year, man, it's got to be the hardest award to pick. But it will be interesting to see what they do with like Cy Young and MVP and things like that. Because do you do just MLB MVP, or are you going to do East MVP, West MVP, Central MVP? Like, how is that going to happen? That's going to be interesting for me.
That is a good point, as it is usually broken down by league. No word on awards yet. I know that's not. I'm sure that's in the back of their mind as they focus on just trying to be able to play the game. But let's move on to another award that I'd say is a bit more important, the Cy Young Award. Now, we'll just, for the sake of this, we'll just have just one Cy Young out of all 30 teams. Jamil, I'll start with you. Is there any pitcher that you see having a real big 2020?
There's a couple guys I like. One guy in particular I do like would be Flaherty from the Cardinals and Walker Buehler on the Dodgers. I think those are two good young pitchers that last year they showed they have really good stuff. And I think this year they could take another really big leap and get up to the upper echelon of pitchers in the National League, like the Max Scherzers, like the Jacob deGroms.
Those are two good young arms there. Will, what are your thoughts on Cy Young?
See, with the shorter season and with a lot of camps, cutting off early, I think you have to go with a little bit more of a traditional pick, maybe not so much as the younger guy coming up. I think you have to go with more of a guy who's been there and who's been doing it. And right now, I don't think anybody has been statistically as good a pitcher over the last 2 years as Jacob deGrom. So I hate to go with almost a cop-out answer in deGrom, but I think that's almost the best choice because the win-loss record isn't there, but the strikeouts there, the ERA, the WHIP, the stats that actually matter. that don't show that he's not getting run support or don't show that he's on the New York Mets. I think whenever you look at him and break him down by an actual statistical point where the stats matter for pitchers, Jacob deGrom is far ahead of some of the other talents, and I think you just have to go with almost the surefire pick.
The Mets being in a different division this upcoming season would be a little different. The Mets having to face opponents like the Red Sox, Orioles, and Pirates, who they don't face as often typically, as they're not in division. So that could change things up a bit too. But DeGrom already won it the past 2 years, I believe. So a three-peat could be in our sights. RJ, I'll turn to you. What are your views for Cy Young?
Yeah, I hate to lay it up, kind of like Will did, but I mean, Max Scherzer, come on. That guy's so good. I don't see how he doesn't win Cy Young every year. I do agree with what you said about an older guy, a veteran, a guy who's been there, done that. This isn't really going to affect him too much. Maybe like a Max Scherzer, a Jeff Verlander, people like that. But yeah, I mean, if you're asking me for a prediction, it's Max Scherzer. That guy's just a freak. I think he's the best pitcher in baseball. I know Jacob deGrom's won the last 2 Cy Youngs. I know he's got a really good, ERA and WHIP and things like that. But man, Max Scherzer is just electric. That guy is just, he's the guy for me.
Everyone named definitely could pitch very well as they have in the past, and it'll be interesting to see what they could do in their new divisions. Given you guys all picked normally National League teams, I'm going to pick an American League one, which might honestly be a dark horse, and that's going to be Jose Barrios from the Minnesota Twins. A lot of competition in that Central Division. It's not going to be easy. Teams like the Reds, Braves, Cardinals, Indians surrounding them. But Jose Barrios showed a lot of upside last season. He's grown a lot as a pitcher, and he's the ace of that Twins staff, which continues to get better. He has the run support to back him up against any team in that division. So I wouldn't doubt Jose Barrios as being a dark horse for the Cy Young this upcoming season. I'd say that's not too bad.
I like that pick. That's not too bad. I think the one thing that I didn't really consider too much when I said Jacob deGrom is that he will have the addition of those American League East teams. And whenever he goes in, because he is on the Mets, he'll be in that Eastern Division if this is how the MLB goes on. So now not only does he face the Nationals, he faces the not the Braves anymore, but the Phillies. But he'll also now have to face the Yankees, the Rays. I mean, these are teams that have solid bats. Even the Red Sox have great young bats with Bogarts, Chavis, Devers. I mean, these are teams that can do some offensive damage. And whenever you look at the easiest division, probably per se, you probably have to go out to the West. And so maybe the Western Division walks out with the Cy Young. But right now, I mean, I do have to personally still stick with Jacob deGrom.
And that's perfectly fair. The West Division does look the weakest at this point. But before we hit our division predictions, let's talk about the big MVP award. We'll say there's one, just like there was for the Cy Young Award. Jamil, we'll start with you. Who you got winning the MVP?
I'm gonna go with Christian Yelich. I think he'll go ahead and claim his MVP this season. And to back that up, not only does he stay playing in the National League Central places other than Pittsburgh, but now you throw in parks like Cleveland, Minnesota, and Chicago, Detroit, and Kansas City. None of those places are necessarily two extreme pitchers parks. None of those, the Tigers and Royals, they don't have the aces, don't have a lot of great pitching. And I think you could see Yelich put up the same numbers he did not only against the National League Central teams, but now throwing those AL Central teams. I think he will continue his dominance.
We'll turn to you. Although it would be interesting to see if Yelich can stay healthy, if he can have that MVP season. Who do you have on your radar, RJ?
Well, I'm going to go with my boy Ronald Acuna. I love that guy. He is the next face of the league. I know Mike Trout's still relatively young. He's going to be around. But this guy, Ronald Acuna, oh, my God. He is great. I mean, I'm biased, obviously, but this guy is just amazing. Well, I think last year before his injury, he was about to have a 40-40 year, 40 stolen bases and 40 home runs. The guy's unreal. Like, come on. I think a full season or not a full because it won't be 162, but 100 games. Throw him out there. He plays with such high energy. I think with a shortened season, I think everybody is going to have to elevate their game because, like Will mentioned, wins and losses are going to mean more now because you don't have that long season where you can just kind of, well, this loss doesn't really matter too much. Like, no, every game is going to matter. And so you're going to have to elevate your play. And a young guy like Ronald Acuna that doesn't know any better, there's no telling what he's going to perform like this year. So I definitely keep my eye out on Acuna down in Atlanta.
Acuna is a rising star, and I think is a solid choice for MVP. Will, what are your thoughts on the MVP?
So I know I said I had to lob it up with Cy Young, but I think I'm going to go a completely different direction when it comes to the MVP. And I don't think that this is going to be a guy that a lot of people may have considered early on, but I am going to go with a little bit of a dark horse on the MVP candidate, and I'm going right back to the Cincinnati Reds. Like I said, I'm going to go Nicholas Castellanos. And whenever it's a bold prediction, and Nicholas Castellanos is not exactly the name you may think right away. But whenever you put him into that Central Division, he has the tough in the National League Central. And yes, you're getting rid of the Pirates and replacing them with the Braves, and that's much harder competition. But now you're adding the Central Division in the American League, which is really weak, such as the Royals, the White Sox, the Indians pitching staff is pretty good. I'm blanking at the Tigers, obviously a team in there also not exactly great when it comes to competition. And Nicholas Castellanos, in only 51 games in a Chicago Cubs uniform last season, had 16 home runs, a 321 average, and had an OPS over 1,000. And I think with a short game, or with a shorter season, and playing in a stadium now, Great American Ballpark, where the balls fly. I mean, that is a hitter-friendly ballpark, 100%. Yes, he may be in a neutral site, but if he is playing out in Great American and he's playing in a park wherever he could take advantage of the dimensions, look out for Nicholas Castellanos.
Yeah, that pick definitely caught me by surprise. I don't think anyone had Nicholas Castellanos on the radar, although he did have a big season last year, helping the Cubs as much as he could after that mid-season trade. For my MVP pick, I'm going to go the easy choice, Mike Trout. Someone had to. I mean, he's in his prime. He'll be 29 about a month into the season in August. After looking at batting averages, he's above the Mendoza line against everyone. Very easy division for Mike Trout to take advantage of. You have quite a few weak pitching staffs in this division, such as the Rockies, such as the Mariners. The Rangers is improving, as is the Padres. But I think Mike Trout, once again, will show his greatness and why he's the best of our generation, especially in the Western Division. I think he should be considered for the MVP every season, just based on his production. So
I mean, it's the rock solid pick. I'm not surprised that somebody went there.
Yeah, hard to argue with that.
Yeah, it's nothing, it's no hot take, but it's probably the right choice in the end. You can always count on Mike Trout to produce. So from here, we'll move into the divisional predictions, and we'll start with the East. Jamil, who is your top four? We'll do that. We'll talk about that. Top four and why.
My top four in the East is going to be the Yankees, the Rays, the Nationals, and the Phillies. I think these four teams are clearly the best teams in the division. Obviously, of the top dog, the Yankees, they were one of the best teams last year. They got Garrett Cole to lead the pack this year. I think he can safely lock them into the first spot. I put the Rays over the Nationals this season. Some people will be surprised because the Nationals just came off that World Series run. But honestly, the Nationals happen. They get hot at the end of the season, and they rode that momentum all the way to a championship. But over the whole course of the season, the Rays were the better team than the Nationals. And I think not a full season, but whatever you want to call this full season, I think the Rays rotation can stack up with the Nationals. And I think their lineup is a little bit better. So I put them in the 2 spot, followed by the Nationals. And the 4 spot, I went with the Phillies, ever so slightly over the likes of some teams like the Mets and the Red Sox. I think the Phillies just will barely get through with the better lineup.
RJ, what are your thoughts on the East?
I have the same 4 teams. I just have them in a little different order. I have the Yankees number 1 because, yeah, I mean, that offense is filthy. They just needed to get the pitching up to par with them, and then you go and get Garrett Cole. So, yeah, they fixed that. Number 2, I actually have the Phillies. I think they're so good. I think last year they struggled, but, they go and sign Zach Wheeler. That was a very underrated pickup for me. I know Strasburg and Cole were out there, but Zach Wheeler going to Philly, I like that. And Andrew McCutchen, he's going to be coming off injury. He was having a really solid season last year before his injury. So now with a full, whatever you want to call it, season with Bryce Harper, JT Realmuto, Andrew McCutchen, they add another pitcher. I think the Phillies are going to be a team to be reckoned with. I have the Nationals third because that pitch, you can't argue with their pitching. Juan Soto is a future star if he's not already a star. The guy's so good. And then I had the Rays fourth. And I like the Rays. I think they're really good. Jamil mentioned how the Nationals really just kind of got hot at the end of last year. But I think the Rays will be right there with them. I actually had the Mets just missing. I think the Mets can. I wonder about the Mets offense, and that's why I put the Rays in over them. So
I think putting the Phillies second is definitely an interesting move. They didn't crack my top 4, but maybe they cracked Will's. Will, what do you have on the East Division?
So if you take their Jamil and RJ's teams, I have all but one. I have, like a broken record, I have the New York Yankees at number 1, as mentioned, Garrett Cole, and that offense is absolutely stupid. Absolute bomb squad. The Bronx Bombers are going to continue to do what they do best. I actually have the Rays sliding in at number 2, similar to Jamil. I have the Rays, the young offensive core has stuck together for the most part. They have a couple of new pieces, but I think those new pieces are really going to help them out. I think Jose Martinez is a great addition of a bat. I think Sasugo will have a really good season if we can see him in the major leagues. And I think with the shorter season, it's going to be more about getting on base and getting on, like, hitting for contact as opposed to hitting for power, being able to put together a couple of runs here and there and just continuously putting together the offense. And I see that a little bit in the Rays. I have the Nationals sliding in at number 3. You can't argue with the pitching staff, similar to what RJ said. Absolutely aces, from 1 to 3. It's one of the most dangerous pitching staffs out in baseball. And they have Juan Soto, obviously a star. The rest of that offensive lineup is a little suspect, and that's why I put him in at 3. And then my team I have at 4. I have the New York Mets. And I go back to Jacob deGrom. I know they're missing Noah Syndergaard, but when I think of Jacob deGrom and I think of Marcus Stroman, I think success. And then they also have bats that are coming together. If everything goes well, we may see Yoenis Cespedes back in the Mets lineup. It's been a hot minute since he's played a significant amount of baseball, but it's a possibility. The addition of him in that lineup would be absolutely disgusting. And Jeff McNeil, Pete Alonso, that young core of that Mets staff is good enough for me to slide them in just at the 4 spot, just ahead of the Phillies.
Mine's similar, very similar. I also have the Yankees finishing first. Despite Luis Severino being out for the season, the addition of Garrett Cole will definitely cover that for a bit. Garrett Cole, James Paxton will be back from injury by the time the season begins. Masahiro Tanaka is still healthy. And then looking at the offense, Aaron Judge will be back from injury. Giancarlo Stanton will be back from injury. Gary Sanchez is coming back from an up year. And as mentioned, the Yankees offense is quite insane. Second, I had the Nationals. And the only thing putting the Nationals over the Rays for me is just how deep they are. Despite losing Anthony Rendon, they still have a pretty deep third base position. Carter Kieboom could be seeing time this season up at third base. And then you have guys like Asdrubal Cabrera, Starlin Castro, or even Howie Kendrick can play the position. You have a Trey Turner who is hitting his prime, great mix of speed and contact. Victor Robles in center had a great season. Juan Soto, of course, needs to be mentioned, and you can't forget their rotation: Strasburg, Scherzer, and Patrick Corbin. So they're looking good for the season. Third, I did have the Rays. Glasnow will be back after missing significant time last season with injury. That'll be big for them. If Charlie Morton can keep the same form he's had the past few seasons, and with Blake Snell, who just won a Cy Young a couple of years ago, they could contend for one of the best pitching staffs. They lost Emilio Pagan in the bullpen, but overall still looks solid with guys like Jose Alvarado, Diego Castillo. And then fourth, it was close. It was between the Mets and the Phillies, but in the end, I decided to go with the Mets. As Will mentioned, they would be missing Noah Syndergaard for the season, but their offense really brought it together a bit more last season, although DeGrom didn't always have his run support. Jeff McNeil and Pete Alonso are only going to be better this season. And Seth Lugo in the bullpen has really developed, and he can help Edwin Diaz a lot, as can Dylan Betances once he's healthy. So I had the Mets rounding that out, and I had the Phillies just missing. We were all pretty similar there on that one. Phillies and Mets definitely the question marks for that division, whether or not they're going to contend. But let's move to the Central. And the Central is arguably as deep as the East, if not deeper. Jamil, let's tell us a little bit about the Central Division.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. The Central is very much deep, just like the East. The way I see the Central shaking out is the Atlanta Braves taking the top spot, followed by the Minnesota Twins. Then a team I'm very, very high on coming into the season in the Cincinnati Reds. And then in the fourth spot, I have the Cardinals barely edging out the Cleveland Indians. And I think the Braves, that they're coming off the NL East title, I think they'll take the Central. The Twins obviously probably have the best offense top to bottom in this. I think they barely edged out of that 2 spot. And I just really, really like the Reds this season. I like a lot of the moves they made. They have one of the most underrated pitching staffs, very, very deep, and I think they can make some noise this season.
Well, as a Cardinals fan, you're coming along with a lot more competition than before. The NL Central was already a deep division, arguably a 4-team race at times, and now you have teams like the Indians and the White Sox and the Twins joining you. How does that? What's that going to do for the Cardinals?
Well, in my prediction, I am right there with Jamil. I have Braves and Twins at 1-2. I think that may almost be a lock with the Braves team that is an absolute young core, absolute. They seem so flawless. I got to actually see them play out in Atlanta last season, and they are just so fun to watch. They really put it together and actually just managed to see what seemed to be fall apart in that game 5 against the Cardinals last season in the NLDS. You can flip me off, RJ. That's fine. But I'll take my 9 runs in an inning, or was it 10? I don't know. But besides the point, whatever it was, McCann shit the bed. But whoever it was, regardless, Braves Twins 1-2. And then I have my Cardinals at 3 compared to 4 for Jamil. I think the Cardinals. Though the roster is, if you look at the team, the roster is never really too sexy, but they somehow find a way to do it almost every single time. I think Goldschmidt had a little bit of an off year last year, not very Goldschmidt-esque, but I think he'll put it together a little bit more this season. Look to see a little bit more of Tommy Edman getting into the lineup, and look to see some of those young outfielders come together, such as Harrison Bader, Tyler O'Neill, and maybe even Lane Thomas working together. And that pitching staff's been pretty consistent between Michaelis, Flaherty, Dakota Hudson being a great ground ball pitcher. I really like what the Cardinals got going on. And then I have a neck and neck race between the Reds and the Cubs. But I have the Reds edging it out just by a little bit with my MVP, Nicholas Castellanos. I think it's going to be just enough to get it into that 4 spot, just enough to get into the final position in the Central. Similar to what Jamil said, I think that's a very underrated pitching staff. When we've been talking about one of the best 1-2-3 punches in baseball, and I think you have to go back to that between Trevor Bauer, Luis Castillo, and Sonny Gray. I mean, those are 3 great names, and I think anybody would love to have any of the 3 on their pitching staff, and the Reds are fortunate enough to have all 3. So I like the Reds just sneaking in just enough, doing just enough to get into the playoffs and finally make it back to postseason baseball.
The Atlanta Braves are in quite an interesting position. I'd say they're an outlier in the division and really in uncharted territory. None of their division foes are in this division, and it's basically, fresh water for them. So it's best I let you, RJ, discuss your prediction and what it means for the Braves to be in this situation.
Yeah, it's definitely definitely different. They're not going to get used to playing, those East teams that they're used to, but it's almost kind of a blessing for them. I mean, you look at the NL East, I think that's the toughest division in baseball. That is, I mean, you look at those top 4 teams. I know the Marlins are bad, but those other 4 teams in the NL East, that's tough. And to have to go up against those other 3 teams as many times as they have to do it, that sucks. So coming into the Central, and now you're going to get the White Sox, Royals, and Tigers quite a bit, and you're going to get the Indians, which I believe they're losing some pitching, and I think they're going to have trouble finding offense outside of Lindor. I think it's better for the Braves now. I think we know how good they are offensively, especially with the addition of Marcell Ozuna. He can kind of take that cleanup hitter role that Josh Donaldson had last year. Speaking of Josh Donaldson, he's on the Twins now, and I think the Twins are going to be second place right behind Atlanta. Those 2 teams, to me, like one of them said, they're pretty much a lock. 3, 4, and 5 to me is where I get it tight. I'm not as high on the Reds as you guys are. I think we still got a couple years before they're, really knocking on the door. So I've got the Cubs at 3 and the Cardinals at 4, just beating the Brewers at 5. I think those 3 teams have basically been under a blanket for the last couple years, as tight as those races have been. And I think it's going to come down to them 3 again this year. I still like the Cubs. I still like the Cubs roster. I know that's kind of, maybe they peaked a couple years ago and they've fallen off since. But you look at the talent on that roster, I can't leave them out. The Cardinals, like you said, their roster is usually not sexy, but they usually find a way to get it done. And I think they'll get it done again. The Brewers, they're right there, but I just think the Cardinals are better. So those are my 4. Definitely the Braves and Twins on top.
I do believe that the Central Division is going to be the closest, at least up top. I do have the Reds finishing first in the Central, which is something I don't think any of you had before. But I think Bauer.
Pump the brakes. Pump them.
Yeah, I have the Reds finishing first. I think Bauer.
Before you go anywhere, I had the Braves as the best record in baseball.
Our buddy Will Turner will love to hear the Reds at the top of Matt Perry's list.
Oh my Lord, that is woo!
I think the Castellanos signing was a very big deal, as well as Moustakas. You got to remember they have him now, providing a lot more to the offense. You have Castillo, who had a fantastic year last year, and he's still growing. So I bet this season will be even better. That's how it's looking, at least, as long as everyone stays healthy. Bauer didn't have his best season last season, but he's shown before that he can do it. And I think in this division, especially against his former team, the Indians, he can for sure do it. Very competitive guy. He'll have that edge. I think that is what puts them up in the first. Second, I have the Minnesota Twins. Now, to their unfortunate luck, they run into the Yankees almost every postseason and get swept every season. But in this format, they might not have to do that. So this provides an advantage for the Twins. And, most home runs ever in a single season last year, the Twins. You have an aging Nelson Cruz, but you do have guys like Max Kepler, Mitch Garver, Miguel Sano is still there. He's on and off, but also provides big power. Byron Buxton in center is a great contact guy. And then the pitching, as I mentioned earlier, my potential dark horse for Cy Young, Jose Barrios. He's leading that rotation. Jake Odorizzi had his best season last season. They signed Rich Hill and Kenta Maeda, which can be big for them. Although they're aging, they've still proved to be able to get it done. I have the Twins second. Third, I'm putting the Braves. You can't look around Acuna and Albies, as well as Fulton Witts. Soroka had a very good season last year. Max Fried is still growing. You have a guy like Shane Green in the bullpen, who's had up and down years, but last season for him, I see the Braves returning to where they were last season, minus the poor first inning against the Cardinals, and placing third in that division. Rounding it out, just beating out the Cubs is the Cardinals. As mentioned, they seem to get it done every year. They don't miss the postseason often. They're very consistent. And with young guys like Harrison Bader, Tyler O'Neill, Tommy Edman, Goldschmidt, who did, as Will mentioned, didn't have the best year of his career last season. But once he gets used to things in St. Louis and settles down, He could be a top 3 first baseman in the league, in my opinion. And that puts them over the Cubs, in my opinion. That and the rotation, Jack Flaherty, potential Cy Young winner one day. I think Jack Flaherty alone can bring the rotation to an elite point and put them in the 4th spot. So moving to the West, which I think we all agreed is probably the weakest division.
Before we even mention the West, let's all just get rid of Dodgers Astros. Please.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that's our top
I
two
think that's
choices.
1-2. However you have them, Astros 1, Dodgers 2, Dodgers 1, Astros 2. We don't need to mention that. That's a lock. That's not going anywhere.
That is I would agree that that's a given. I myself had Dodgers Astros, so and that'll be interesting to see play out, considering they've met in the World Series before, and we're surrounded by all the cheating now years later. So we'll just skip to the 3 spot. RJ, we'll start with you. Who you got in 3 and 4?
Well, if you guys are going to be high on the Cincinnati Reds, I'm going to be high on the San Diego Padres. They're coming. Fernando Tatis is a future star. I love that guy. He is so fun to watch. He is just a stud out there. I actually kind of like their pitching with Chris Paddock and Joey Lucchesi. I would have liked to have seen them gone out and get Steven Strasburg. Played college in San Diego. That would have been nice to bring him back home. And I think they need an ace to really anchor that rotation and, kind of bring everybody along. But I think, Fernando Tatis and Manny Machado together on the same side, shortstop and third base, that's a cheat code. That's not fair. That is literally insane. So don't try to hit a ball over there. I like the Padres. I think they're coming. And then 4th place, I've actually got the Oakland Athletics. I don't think they're that good, honestly. I think they'll be good enough to get in because the West is weak, and I think they'll beat up on the Mariners and Giants, some of those teams at the bottom. Just beating the Diamondbacks. I think the Diamondbacks end up 5th. It's close, but I do give it to the A's. But guys like Matt Chapman will come through, and I think elevate them to get that 4th spot.
Will, what are your views on the West Division, 3rd and 4th?
So I actually don't have either one of those teams in there. I actually am completely different. I have the Angels sliding in at 3, and I have the Diamondbacks sliding in at 4. I have the Angels coming in at 3. Whenever you look at the Angels, I mean, they had Tommy La Stella last year, who absolutely broke out from an average standpoint. He was putting the bat on the ball every means necessary. But whenever you look at Tommy La Stella's career, I don't think you can expect that again. I don't think those numbers are to be the new norm for Tommy La Stella, but it doesn't matter. You have Anthony Rendon. Yeah, I mean, you added a brand new bat that is an absolute stud to that team, and then you have the new manager in Joe Madden, and I think that will really help out in the Angels season, especially a short season. I think it'll be nice to have Joe Madden behind him. It'll be nice to have a brand new third baseman in Anthony Rendon, and then Mike Trout's there. I mean, that's just a given. Shohei Ohtani maybe even will get some. Will do some good over there in LA. I really like the Angels sliding in on the short season. And then number 4, like I said, the Diamondbacks. I really like the addition of Madison Bumgarner. I think Madison Bumgarner needed a change of scenery, and he's not going too far. It's not like he's having to explore across the country or anything such as that. He's he went from California to Arizona. It's not very far at all. And Zach Gallen, also a great pitching arm out there in the Diamondbacks rotation. I also like a couple of their offensive pieces, such as David Peralta, Ketel Marte, and Starling Marte. I love that outfield. That is a phenomenal outfield. And I just think that the Diamondbacks have just enough pieces to just kind of put everything together and maybe expect to see another season where Carson Kelly's finally putting it together, which would be a very underrated bat to have in that lineup. I like what the D-backs can do from an offensive standpoint and what they can do on the rubber. I like the D-backs sliding in at 4.
Jamil, how do you see the 3rd and 4th place spots for the West Division coming out?
My 3rd and 4th place is a mix of RJ and Will. In 3rd, I have the Diamondbacks. I like a lot of the moves they made. I like going out and getting Marte. And I like Ketel Marte in center field. I like them going out and getting Marte from the Pirates. I think that was another shrewd move by them. They had a good offseason. And then fourth, I have the Oakland A's. I think the A's are another one of those. They're like the Rays, a real scrappy team. The national media never gives them a lot of respect. But I think in this division, I think the A's have the pitching and the offense to – I think they have the best mix of it compared to other teams left. The Angels, they scare me with their pitching staff. Can Shohei Ohtani go out and actually pitch? And the team I like in the West that could be a dark horse is the Rockies. I think they can hit the ball a lot. I think they could challenge that fourth spot, but I think the Oakland A's are just too – I think the Oakland A's are the best team of the rest.
Not bad. I do like how that was also our most diverse division in decisions. I don't have anything – I mean, I don't have the same combos that you guys had. Third place for me, I have the Oakland Athletics, actually. Marcus Semien, I want to spotlight. He received MVP votes last season. He had the best year of his career so far. And I think him as well as Matt Olson can provide a nice power punch in that lineup. Ramon Laureano out in center as well, a great fielder, great arm, highlight reel, honestly, and can hit for average. You know, they were putting something together. I think their pitching is their weakest link, at least. You have Mike Fiers, who, you know, he's thrown a no-hitter. He's had a few up seasons, some big moments, but overall kind of fits in the middle of, you know, is he elite? No, not yet. Not really. You have Sean Manaea, who missed some time last season due to injury, but he the season prior had an up year, the best one of his career. So if Manaea can stay healthy all season, things are looking much better for them. You could also see the call-up of Jesus Luzardo and AJ Puck, two of their top pitching prospects could be seeing the MLB soon. So especially if they're factored into the rotation, you know, I see the Athletics contending and eventually getting a playoff spot. And for fourth, I have the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. I think a healthy Shohei Ohtani and Tommy La Stella will make a big difference. La Stella had a fantastic year last year. He was an all-star before getting injured. We've seen what Ohtani can do here and there. The injury threw him off, but once he's back healthy, we should expect more of the same from him. Mike Trout's still Mike Trout, as I mentioned earlier. He'll be 29 years old, prime of his career. I think the worst part of it is that this shortened season takes away a bit from his career. You know, this is a generational talent, a guy that can break records potentially, and he's missing the time to do so. So I think that's the biggest thing. I know that's not an Angels thing, but it's a Mike Trout thing. The rotation has gotten a little better. Andrew Heaney's improving. They picked up Dylan Bundy, who didn't have his best stuff with the Orioles, but at the same time, he wasn't backed up with an offense that the Angels have. An aging Justin Upton, an aging Albert Pujols, they'll provide minimal production. But you have guys waiting in the wings like Joe Adell, who, you know, could be as soon as this year, could provide some help for their offense. So that was my third and fourth. I had the Diamondbacks just missing. I know a few of you had them in there. But we'll move to the most important part of the season, I would say, the World Series. Now, we don't know how they'll do this. They might put restrictions and make it AL versus NL, or they might put free reign on it. For the sake of this, make it a little bit more fun, we'll put free reign on it. No league restrictions. I'll start with Jamil. Jamil, who do you see in the World Series and who's winning it in 7?
The World Series, I think, is going to come down to who has the best mix of pitching and hitting. And honestly, I think, not to be a homer, but I think the Rays have one of the best mixtures of pitching and hitting left. I think I could see them versus the Dodgers in the World Series, depending on how everything aligns.
The Rays are definitely an interesting pick there. That division won't be easy, so it'll be interesting to see how far they get. RJ, I'll move to you. What is your call on the World Series?
Yeah, honestly, I don't want to sound like a homer, but I think Braves and Dodgers, an all NL World Series, something you don't really get to see ever, obviously. I think, like you said, a mix of hitting and pitching. The Dodgers should be there. You know, the Dodgers have been there the past couple years. The Braves, I love it. I think Mike Soroka is a stud. I think if Pete Alonso wouldn't have broken the home run record last year, Soroka should have been Rookie of the Year. But Braves Dodgers World Series, sign me up for that. A lot of young stars, Cody Bellinger, Ronald Acuna. I think adding Mookie Betts to the Dodgers is going to be huge for them. How could it not be? Yeah, give me that. Give me Dodgers Braves in a 7-game series.
Will, how do you see your World Series turning out?
So, Matt, whenever you were giving your 3 and 4 for the West, I actually drew out exactly how I thought this was going to go. And this is really nuts because I took my top 4 teams and gave them their buys. And then I took my bottom 8 teams and kind of ranked them March Madness style. So where the number 5 best the number 5 best record went against number 12, so on and so forth. And you see a couple cross-divisional matches in the first round. For me, I had Rays versus D-backs for the Rays being the number 1 team who just missed the top 4 and the D-backs being the last team who just scoots in. I had Twins Mets and I had Cardinals Angels going up against each other early on. But whenever I finally broke it down, it got really boring and we ended up back at National League, American League. I ended up with Braves Yankees. And I have don't want to sound like a homer because my team didn't even make the damn World Series, but I'm going New York Yankees. I think with the addition of Garrett Cole, it takes them to the next level. They have the bats, and that's been proven. And if you can keep a couple players healthy, if you can keep them in the lineup, I think the Yankees are definitely the force to be reckoned with. I think the Braves pitching just might not have enough to slow down those Yankee bats. There are a great couple of arms on the Braves team, and I think it'll definitely be close, but I just see the Yankees offense just outpowering just a little bit over that Braves
We don't know yet how the playoff bracket will work for sure. We were just going off of our of the knowledge we have of it. So anything we have said so far is, hypothetical, of course, and based on a bracket unknown so far. For the sake of that, for the sake of fun, I'm gonna go with the Yankees Twins World Series. We
know that story ends.
We saw. Yeah, not sound like a homer. We did see the ALDS last season. Very exciting. Lots of power between both teams, and both teams have quite a pitching staff. I think this is just the perfect season for the Yankees. Because by the time the season starts, everyone will be back from injury, and they have enough depth to carry them through the season if someone does get injured. We saw that last season with the next man up spiel that they brought. I would say Yankees in 6 over the Twins. Barrios can clutch out at least one win for them, and then their offense in another. But I think that would just be really interesting to see, especially All-American League. Will, do you have something to say on that?
Yeah, before you go on, I have 3 really quick points. A, I'm a baseball analyst. I didn't pick my own damn team. B, that's a shot to all 3 of you right there. B, what was my B? I forgot. Oh, you said the next man up mentality. Now I'm going to be a homer. That's called the Cardinal way. Don't forget it. And I forgot what C was, but there you go. That's what I'll do. Those are my 2 points right there.
Well, if we're going to be honest, all of our teams are better than your team.
I don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear it.
Yeah. All of us root for
on paper, at least. RJ, your team got canned by them last year, so I can't really help you there.
I don't want to hear that.
I don't need to hear it.
You could say that the Cardinals pitching staff was the only thing better than the Atlanta Braves. The Braves had a better bullpen. They had a better offensive standpoint. And how'd that go? Yeah. Here you go. Hold that one.
From a third party, the Braves looked like the better team, but in the end, or in the first inning at least, the Cardinals turned out to be better.
Dexter Fowler swung at a curveball in the dirt, and Brian McCann let it go to the backstop and caused all of that. He went down infamously as the man who ruined the Braves. Never mind. Brian McCann seems like a guy who might punch me. I'm not going to put that out there. Not like Jared Goff. I'll talk about Jared Goff any day.
Yeah, this all sounds like a soapbox for another time.
I hate Jared Goff.
But
all right, you're done, pal.
If he wants to fight me, we can, but I'll mute myself for right.
We'll wrap things up here. A lot of good stuff here. A lot of good predictions were said. no matter what, this season will be an interesting one, especially if it's not the normal alignment. So for myself, Will, Jamil, and RJ, we have been the GMs for hire, and this is our take on the 2020 MLB season. Be sure to let us know what your thoughts are on the MLB season coming up, and if you have any other ideas for shows or whatever the case is, something for us to talk about. We have all the time in the world, nothing else going on. So be sure to let us know. And yeah, that's it. Catch us next time when we storm
Make
the
a podcast.
Yeah, make our podcast.
We're gonna make a podcast on the next episode. I'm thinking that's a good idea.
See you guys.
Peace.